Hi, I want to welcome everybody. I'm Vince Mullet. I'm the chairman of the Small Business Cabinet Council of the KCMA. The Small Business Cabinet Council is the sponsor of this webinar. Our committee was created by the KCMA to add value to small and medium-sized manufacturers. We'll typically have an article in the newsletter, webinars throughout the year, and receptions at the spring and fall meetings, all targeted at hot topics that we're dealing with in our business currently. Just so everybody knows, this webinar is being recorded and we'll send it out via email afterwards. Okay, I want to hand it off to Todd for introductions. Todd, you're muted.
Sorry about that, folks. I was on mute, but I was having a good time talking to myself. My name is Todd Shuttleworth. I am also a member of the committee, and I have the honor of introducing our two speakers today. Let me start with Carrie Cavanaugh. She's the senior HR consultant at Finding Great People. Before joining Finding Great People, she held senior human resource management positions with prominent organizations, working with companies with employees based for between 50 and 30,000 employees. She has been responsible for HR department startups and the management of multiple HR sites within a single company. She's gained vast experience, including training and development, policy and procedure, benefits, compensation, and labor relation union avoidance. During her career, she's played a significant role in the development, rollout, and delivery of multiple training programs, including diversity, hiring, recruiting, management fundamentals, critical conversation skills, and as mentioned before, union avoidance. She is certified in crucial conversations as a trainer and facilitator. Carrie has significant experience in the management and mitigation of safety risk, handling OSHA inspections, workers' compensation, case management, and internal training and audits, receiving her OSHA 10-hour certification. Carrie has a bachelor's degree in human resource management and marketing from the University of South Carolina. Ashley Brooks is Vice President of Workplace Strategies at HTI. Throughout her career, Ashley has spent thousands of hours helping top manufacturers across the country overcome labor challenges and stabilize workforces with creative solutions to hiring and retention. In her role, Ashley leads a team of consultants who focus on helping clients build workplaces that prioritize the human experience while simultaneously increasing the bottom line through analysis, process improvement, training, and strategy. With an extensive background in HR, Ashley holds her professional and human resource certification and brings expert experience in leadership development, compensation analysis, HR compliance, talent strategy, and strategic business planning. Utilizing her experience, she's created a proprietary analysis tool, the Workplace Forensic Report, that helps organizations objectively assess how well they're positioned to stabilize talent and pinpoint actions they can take to improve their approach. Ashley has a bachelor's degree in human services and resources from Anderson University. She is a graduate of Leadership Anderson and a 30 under 40 recipient. Just as a housekeeping note, please put all of your questions in the chat room. We're going to allow these ladies to do their presentation, and then we will do Q&A at the end of their presentations. Carrie?
Wonderful. Well, thank you all for having me. I'm thrilled to be here and talking about this topic. As an HR consultant, my clients often come to me and with struggles like this to say, well, how do we recruit and retain great people when we're seeing what's going on in the market, but perhaps we're in a different kind of industry. So today, getting to talk to you about this, I think really is exciting. I am from Find Great People. So we are what started as a staffing and recruiting firm. We do recruiting and staffing all over the country, but just white collar staffing. So we don't staff any manufacturing facilities. But we added our HR consulting division several years ago and now provide services across the lifespan of an employee, from hire to exit interviews and all kinds of things that we can do to support people through outplacement. So don't want to get stuck up on that. Just want to move on and let's talk about why remote or hybrid work isn't going anywhere. So when Todd reached out to me initially, he wanted to really talk through and seek to understand what we're seeing in the market related to remote work and hybrid work. And my presentation is going to focus really on some of the statistics related to what's going on in the market. And then Ashley's going to have some really phenomenal tools for you on how you can make this work, especially in a manufacturing setting. Because we often hear, well, we can't do this because we're manufacturing. So we want to kind of go through it and let you see what you can and might be able to do to really support your workforce. So just to give you some current state data, 66% of US employees work remotely at least part-time. And 68% of Americans would prefer to be fully remote. And what we find interesting is that most people, well, a lot of people, 23% would be willing to take a 10% pay cut to work from home indefinitely. And what we find, especially on the recruiting side, is that we might think that we're paying good, square, fair market rates, but when we see individuals that are willing to be paid less to work remotely, we've got to consider that we may be on the hook to pay more when we can't offer that. At least 50% of employers believe remote work reduces absenteeism, and we've seen a reduction in the number of sick days that people are taking, 50% less usage in sick days. And now 60% of companies are fully remote. Now, this is small compared to the 44% of companies that don't have remote work, but the trend is changing. And 59% of workers now report being more likely to choose an employer that allows remote work versus one that doesn't. So if you're not offering remote work, we find that our applicant pool, and Ashley can speak more to this, the applicant pool just gets a lot smaller for us. The estimates are that by 2025, we're going to have 36.2 million Americans working remotely, a 417% increase from pre-pandemic levels. Now, 85% of managers surveyed now believe that teams of remote workers are going to be the norm instead of the exception. And 81% of workers expect their employer to continue supporting remote work. And this is interesting because before the pandemic, you didn't talk to tons and tons of people that had remote work, and a lot of employees wouldn't ask for it, or if they asked for it, they were shut down. And we really only saw it a lot in situations where we might have had to make an accommodation under ADA. But now what we're seeing is organizations that put people out and did remote work during the pandemic, what we were able to prove to our employees is that it was possible, and they want to keep doing it. Now, a lot of my clients go, well, I'm really worried about productivity. Actually, 68% of enterprises have said that there's been an improvement in productivity since they implemented remote work. And 94% of employees report feeling like their productivity is the same or higher than before they went to remote work. And 75% of employees believe they have a better work-life balance working remotely. Turnover is one of our biggest things that I know you guys worry about. I know that my clients worry about, and the cost of turnover is outrageous. We all know that. It's upwards of 50 to 100% of someone's salary, maybe more. Turnover is seen to reduce by 50% when employees have access to a remote work option. And it can be attributed to many things, not just being able to work at home, but feeling that they have more creativity in a remote work environment, being able to have a better family work-life balance. All of that gives us less turnover. And 21% of workers are willing to give up vacation for flexible work options. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I don't want to give up my vacation for anything. But 21% of people are willing to give up vacation for flexible work options. So what we're seeing is the market is telling us that not only is this not going away, that this is something employees want. And when it comes to what they want, what's interesting is that not all employees are interested in a fully remote environment. So a lot of times when we talk about remote work, the immediate thought is, oh my gosh, I'm going to send all my people home and I'm never going to see them. What we actually see is 45% of employees surveyed actually would prefer to have an option that allows them some time in the office and some time at home. Now, there are a large percentage that want something fully remote, but it doesn't have to be a yes or no. There are some options in the middle that clients are finding very successful. Now, this question comes up, and I hear it all the time as a reason to say we're not going to offer remote work. People say, well, we're in manufacturing, and if I can't do it for everyone, I shouldn't do it for anyone. And I think we want to stop that thinking and remind ourselves that what is fair is not always equal. What we want to make sure happens is that we are looking at options for employees that could be remote and allowing those positions to be remote. At the same time, it's certainly an option when we have, and Ashley, again, we'll talk about this, when we have manufacturing employees, and yes, if they're a machine operator, they can't do that from home. But if they're interested in working from home at some point, it becomes very much a professional development discussion to say, I understand that's where you want to go. And if you're going to get there and move into this role, here's what you're missing, and here's how we can help you get there. So one of the things that I've done a lot of since the pandemic is help clients write policies around remote work or telework, whatever we want to call it. And some of the things that we found that we need to include, and if you're going to do something like this, instead of just saying, oh yeah, we'll figure it out as we go, we don't want to do that. So we want to set, like we do with any policy, really clear expectations. So we can set our work hours. You have to be present and available on your device between the hours of 8 and 5. We want specific discussions about timekeeping and reporting, communication guidelines, technology uses, and security protocol. So we want to work with our IT folks to make sure that we're using proper VPNs and we're accessing data in a secure way. Virtual meeting etiquette. This is always the big thing. And I always say we want to have it what I call a business mullet. So we want to be business from the waist up. We can have leggings and stretch pants on from the waist down, but we have the right to set that meeting etiquette. We can set requirements as to what's in the background behind us. We can set all of those protocol to help mitigate concern about these kind of situations. We can talk about setting boundaries between work and home life, how we approve time away, how we do team building. The main thing I would tell you is just because you've never done it in the past, maybe I can do it in the future for certain positions. And I always advise, let's pilot it with a few positions to see if there's some that might be more apt to be successful. What I would tell you is if you don't have a work from home policy at all, now may be the time to start thinking about writing one. The pandemic crisis showed us that so many people could work from home, making people question the thought of coming back into the office. Acknowledging that we don't always have to see each other to know that we're working can really help us achieve better retention rates, remain competitive, and allow that flexibility. Now, that was super fast, but I only had like 10 minutes because Ashley has some phenomenal stuff that I know will be very suited for you all specifically. But I'm always happy to help any of you if you are interested in creating policies and procedures around remote work. If you just want to bounce ideas off of somebody that's been there before, I am happy to help you do that. am a certified HR professional. I'm also certified in compensation. That's my first love is compensation. And I can talk about with you for an extended period of time about how we do risk much higher compensation rates and benefit rates if we're not offering some of these things to our folks. So I'm going to turn it over to Ashley, and she's that way on my computer screen, but I will let you know, I just have to speak, and she didn't pay me to say this, but HTI based in Greenville, I think Ashley's in Anderson. I will tell you that my company doesn't do any kind of plant staffing, but if I'm asked to refer somebody for plant staffing, I send them to HTI because I think they're phenomenal. So Ashley, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Carrie. That was amazing information. I know that was really valuable to everybody that's on the call today and definitely accurate with where we are in today's market. Let me pull up my screen quickly and switch the presentation. So as Carrie mentioned, the basis of my presentation today is really going to talk about how to navigate the workforce of today in manufacturing. Just to give you a little background on HTI, we're a human resource and recruiting company. We focus on helping our clients with meeting their HR and business needs and having those align through organizational efficiency, labor stabilization, employee engagement. Probably 85–90% of our business is in manufacturing. So I'm in manufacturing plants day in and day out, helping to address this challenge that we're seeing today between where manufacturing is headed, where they've been, and what employees are seeking in the manufacturing industry. For all of you guys, as you're aware, you're experiencing this. The pandemic changed everything. We saw employees go through furloughs and layoffs that made them question and have a lack of confidence in where they stood in their careers. We began to see remote work, as Carrie mentioned, become something that they saw, hey, I can do this and this can be successful. They began to have more time to focus on their family time, on their health, and really that began to change the perspective of what employees were looking for in today's market. And that's really what has created the situation that we're in today. We've seen in the manufacturing sector that at least 84% of all the manufacturing jobs that were lost here in 2020 have been added back to the payroll. But what that number doesn't show us is that the turnover still remains high. So although all of the reports are showing that, hey, we've got all of these positions back in place, we who are on the front lines are beginning to see, yeah, but I've had 3 people in that job in the past month because we're not able to retain the people that we're putting into that job. So we're seeing that a lot of people in manufacturing are jumping from position to position, and we're feeling the drain of that on our industry. We've also seen that the national unemployment average has gotten back to almost where it was pre-pandemic, but that's another number that doesn't show us the total picture, because what it's not showing us is that we've actually had the labor participation rate fall, and we've had over 50 million people who left the workforce during the pandemic, and 2 million of those have not returned. So we're seeing the labor participation drop to an all-time low. And so although that's what we're showing, that we're back to where we were pre-pandemic on unemployment, what we're not seeing is that that is a percentage of a much lower base of employees. So we're actually pulling from a lot smaller group. The other thing that a lot of people haven't realized is that in manufacturing, we began to see this problem way before the pandemic hit. As you can see, total employment through 1980 to 2019 grew by 60 million employees. But in manufacturing, we saw from 1980 to 2019, we had 7.5 million employees leave manufacturing. So we were already beginning to see that our industry was taking a hit over other industries and the amount of interest that we had coming into manufacturing. We are now struggling with what you see from millennials is a really reserved interest in manufacturing careers. So we're seeing 58% of millennials say that manufacturing jobs have limited career prospect and that they don't have interest in going into that field. And we're also seeing a huge drop even on the white collar side of manufacturing, with only 12.8% of American-born undergraduates currently studying engineering. And so as we begin to see that, it's exacerbating the problem that we're seeing as a whole from the return of the pandemic and the fact that we were already seeing this as an issue in manufacturing before we even got to that point. We're also beginning to see a gender participation shift post-pandemic that is also adding to this issue. So we're seeing that women are coming back into the workforce at a much higher rate than men, which a lot of people don't realize. And we've actually seen women at their highest point in history entering the workforce after the pandemic. Some of that is because we've seen, men move into starting their own businesses. Some are even staying at home. Some are doing more flexible jobs that allow, them to sort the work in the household better. But what we're seeing is that is another area where historically women had not gone into manufacturing the same rate as men. So that's another hit that we're seeing to the manufacturing industry. So I'm telling you all of this just to say that not only have employee wants changed, so what we're having to compete for in the market to be able to attract these people changed, but we also, the pool of people that we're pulling from has also changed. So we have less manufacturing, low unemployment, employee market the way it is, and we're competing for a very small pool of talent. And so the ability to be creative and think outside the box and really think about, to Carrie's point, you may have never thought about it before, but now's the time to think about it because this isn't changing. We're not going back to the way it was before. And the answer isn't to find more talent because the talent is not out there. It's adapting so that you can keep the talent that you currently have. And so really, I want to spend the remainder of my time talking to you guys about some of the solutions that we're starting to talk to our clients about in manufacturing that hopefully will help you guys as well with how you can compete with this smaller market. One thing to remember is a lot of employers and a lot of our clients seem to get overwhelmed because they said they feel like they're overwhelmed with the fact that they have to be great at everything. How can I do all of these things that every employee is wanting? You don't have to be great at everything. You have to pick what you want to be great at, and then you have to make sure that that's visible to your employees or to the applicant base that you're trying to attract. So work-life balance obviously is something that, although you may not be an A+ in work-life balance, you at least probably need to figure out how you can be a C in work-life balance, because we do see that being a big undercurrent in today's workforce, that they're looking for that. And there are a lot of employers out there trying to figure out how to be an A+. So you don't have to be an A+, but you have to figure out how to at least offer some type of work-life balance. But then you can choose to be great in other things. You can choose to be great in the advanced technology that you're implementing in your facility and offering training opportunities so people feel like they're able to upskill. You can begin to offer creative benefits. We're seeing a lot of people do tuition reimbursement. Even childcare stipends are big right now because during the pandemic, a lot of people lost childcare. They stayed at home with their children. So to get people back to work, we're starting to see childcare stipends become a benefit that's being offered. A lot of wellness time and wellness initiatives are huge right now. So even just building creative benefits package that'll allow you to put and market yourself in that way. Employee focused culture is another one. So whereas before we had a lot of employees, especially in manufacturing, who would come to work and just do their base job and they were content with that. Now we're seeing a shift to employees want meaningful work. They want work that offers them a sense of purpose. And so that's important even at the employee on the floor level on the front lines. I was actually talking to a client last week about putting in a different approach to the way they handle quality issues, or when there's a problem on the floor, a different way to approach that. And what they ended up doing is, instead of going and when there was a quality issue on the line, having their group of senior executives or their leaders come into a room and figure out what happened, they're now pulling that employee into the room and saying, hey, you're on the floor all day, every day. What about our process caused you to have that quality defect? And they're bringing them into the process. Those are the types of things we've got to start doing in manufacturing so that we are continuing to make them feel that they have a sense of purpose in their job. So overall, it's not a focus on being great at everything. It's about picking what you want to be great at and really focusing there. So a couple things you can make from an adaptation perspective. I want to give you some examples and real life examples that you guys could use. We are seeing shift modeling being a huge thing in manufacturing currently, people looking at that typical 8-hour model, first, second, and third shift with heavy overtime as something that they need to review. Right now, overtime, as you guys are probably aware, is difficult to get employees to work. Used to, it was all about how much money can I make in overtime. But now we're starting to see there's a sector of the population that still wants that, but there's also a large section of the population that says, I really just want the work-life balance. I don't care about the overtime. So really being able to get flexible with your shift models. We're seeing a lot more 12-hour shifts go into place, which is that ABCD model. That's a good option if you have to work a lot of overtime, you have to work 24/7, and you can't figure out a way to do that without requiring people to work extensive required overtime, that at least the 12-hour model does give them consistency. They can project when they're going to be off. They know when they're scheduling, they're going to have scheduled family time. 10-hour shifts are becoming a new thing that a lot of manufacturers are looking at. It does have a gap in the manufacturing process, so you do have some downtime, but a lot of people are maximizing that through PMs and things like that during the downtime. So 10-hour shifts are 4 10s with a weekend shift. So we're seeing that be a new thing that people are also trying to get implemented, and that's very competitive in the recruiting world. No Saturday work in advertisements. If you can figure out how to make that work, that is a huge benefit for people to know that they're going to have Saturdays off. And then we're also seeing a focus on part-time and gig work. So I know that sounds crazy, but we actually had a manufacturer here in upstate South Carolina who actually staffed 50% of their workforce with a part-time model for a period of time. And what they did is they actually published onto a gig work app the shifts that they had available. They brought some workers in who were kind of float workers and trained them on some of their jobs that didn't have as big of a skill set that was needed. And they allowed people to sign up almost like gig work when they were available to work, and they were able to keep it running without having to require the overtime. So it's just thinking outside of the box. The other thing is to compete with remote work by adding value when you're together. So one of the things that we've seen is we are starting to see a shift, and I think Carrie talked about it, where we actually have a lot of people that don't necessarily want 100% remote work. They want hybrid work. And we're seeing more and more and more of a transition to that because people are beginning to see that they miss being at work with others. They miss learning from each other. They miss the engagement and collaboration. And so one of the things as an employer that you have to do is really make sure that when you do have people together, that you're fostering this sense of collaboration and team connection. Not that they're just coming into work, doing their job and going home, but that you're doing things that help bring them together. That could be employee-focused teams. That could be skip level meetings, like we mentioned earlier, bringing them into problem solving. All of those things are the things that you're going to want to be doing so that they value being at work and then have a reason to rethink if they have an opportunity to be 100% remote. We also, as a whole, have to start working on changing the perception. The only way we're going to change the perception is not only just by putting stuff out there, but by actually changing who we are in the manufacturing sector. So what a lot of people, you can't recruit the same way that you used to recruit. You've got to start to have a social media presence. You've got to have school involvement. And through that social media presence, it's not just talking about how many products you manufactured yesterday. It's actually talking about showing your employees out there in the community, talking about what you did for your employees and showing that you're appreciative of what they've done, talking about the achievements that your employees have made, and beginning to really build a brand and value proposition for your brand that you can put out there. And a lot of my manufacturing clients, they've never really had to have a focus on what their brand was or what their value proposition was. But that's a brand new thing that we've got to have out there on all social media components. So certainly is something that if you're not doing that, you need to start thinking proactively about your value proposition and the messaging that you're putting out there to workers. And then finally, one of the other trends we're beginning to see is non-traditional labor. So beginning to really think through not just those workers that you typically had, but beginning to see how can you tap into components of the workforce that others may not be utilizing? So employees with language barriers. That doesn't mean that your entire facility has to be Spanish speaking or has to speak a different language. But what it can mean is that you could hire a supervisor who speaks a different language on one shift, and you could focus on trying to do pockets of those employees that you can bring into the workforce. As I mentioned early, part-time workers and then migrant workers are also something. We have another manufacturing client that we work with who's actually started a new program where they're actually bringing workers over from Puerto Rico and actually providing housing for them, getting them to work here. And they're doing it on pretty much a 2-year contract basis with the option to eventually roll full-time and relocate here. But they're bringing them over and actually providing the housing, providing the work, and actually using them to supplement the workforce that they're able to find in their local area. We're also seeing a focus on second chance workers who may have a background issue that typically we would avoid, and working with government and state programs that offer assistance in getting these people back to work and even protection for the employer. And then also accommodate other workers. We've actually had a employer last year who spent a lot of money putting into place options for being able to bring workers who were hearing impaired into the manufacturing environment, ensure they were safe. They decided it was worth the effort and worth the money to put in the ability to bring in those workers and make sure they were safe in order to tap into a component of the workforce that a lot of people always say, you know, in manufacturing, you have to be able to hear. Well, they've seen a huge success with that, and they're actually having about an 85% retention rate when they recruit people into the areas who are able to come in there and get the opportunity that they may not otherwise have gotten. And then apprenticeships. A lot of us like to look for the diamond in the rough. So we like to say, hey, I have to have the perfect candidate. I don't have time to train. I work in manufacturing every day. I understand the struggle with training. But one of the things we've got to start doing is being open to really hiring from the outside. So hiring for soft skills and potential, and then doing customized training plan and programs that allow us to tap in to training people to be what we need them to be. So that can be on the job training. It can be assisting with tuition for 2-year technical degrees while they're an operator. We're even seeing a lot of people work with high schools to allow high school students that are juniors and seniors to come into manufacturing, begin to get that skill set before they graduate. And they're just working part-time hours while they're in school. So really getting flexible and really getting creative on how you build your own talent is a huge focus in today's market. At the end of the day, as Carrie mentioned, as I've tried to show you guys today, we're not going to find more workers. So we've got to adapt or fall behind. And the employers who are willing to embrace that are going to be an employer of choice. Those who aren't are going to continue to struggle with, yes, we're backfilling our positions, but we're backfilling them over and over and over again. I am honored to be a speaker for you guys today. Certainly, if you have questions after this webinar or during the webinar, I'd be glad to answer them. My contact information is listed below.
Ashley, one of the questions that came up from the panelists or from the participants, and I'll answer it, and then if you've got some too, was asking if we could provide examples of some of the positions that are being able to be held remotely versus some that are not within the manufacturing sector. And I've seen, when it comes to manufacturing, I have seen us send designers, CAD designers, I've sent engineers, logistics people, IT, any kind of analytical position. I've seen a lot of those go to some hybrid. I've also seen situations where supervisors have, you'll have a team lead for team A and a team lead for team B, and they might, if there's some analytical work that has to be done, A will be at the plant managing the people, where B will be offsite doing other things. But I think the real issue or the things that I've seen work really successfully are a lot of those independent contributors or team leaders of people that are not necessarily producing the actual product. So logistics, engineering, even some levels of quality can work remote.
Yeah, I would agree, Carrie. I think we've probably seen, I would estimate 60-65% of our manufacturing clients implement some type of work from home. Most of those are in that white collar, not touching the product directly. And a lot of times they're allowed to work from home 1 to 2 days a week. So it's a hybrid model is what we're seeing most of our manufacturers implement.
And what I'm seeing is that those hybrid models are not dictated by the employee, it's dictated by the needs of the organization. So if Mondays are the busiest days, well, we don't let people work remotely on Mondays. That we perhaps, we have a set schedule, and I'm going to be Tuesday, Thursday, Ashley's going to be Wednesday, Friday, and we're all going to be in the office on Monday.
Yes. Yeah.
And we found that it really does work. It works. I've found it works really well. I mean, I've been working remotely since 2009, and I will say that I prefer personally a hybrid model. For me, that's the one I love, because that gives me a chance to reconnect with my folks. So another question that came up is, we talked about the gains in work from home and what are some of the challenges or the things that we have to manage. I will say that if you have a work from home program or a remote work program, you will quickly learn whether or not your managers and leaders understand how to set goals and hold people accountable. You'll realize really quickly if they don't, because sometimes when we have people there, it's real easy to speak to the group or kind of push people along. But sometimes you'll probably notice that other people will cover for other people. Whereas if we're working remotely, your managers have to be able to set very clear, very realistic expectations and hold people accountable. In order to do that, you have to start out by having some really clear policies. That's something I mentioned, is making sure that you really level set the expectations, the requirements, and that you don't roll this out and say, we're never going to change this policy. You roll this out and say, we're going to pilot it for 30 days, or we're going to pilot it for 60 days, or, whatever the case may be. And we're going to be honest about how it's working and how it's not working. And we reserve the right at any point to pull it back. So you have to really be careful about how the expectations are set and how you hold people accountable. And Ashley, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but I have seen it. I have seen it not work. And when it doesn't work, 99% of the time, it's that the manager did not set the expectations. The manager did not hold people accountable. The manager did not remain in contact with the employee. And that's usually what I see go wrong.
Yeah, and I would say some of the other challenges that you have to be aware of are really some of the cultural challenges that you have to proactively make sure that you're addressing. So feeling of inconsistency, especially they get remote work, we don't, versus your direct and indirect employees. So really managing to that, as some of the tips that I talked about earlier were really targeted at how do you manage the direct employees, not feeling like they can get remote work. So really balancing and showing that you're doing something for them as well. Yes. Technology can certainly be a struggle. And how do you handle making sure that people have the technology that they need to work from home, VPN access, data security, things of that nature. And then honestly, team dynamics, really making sure that you have a focus, especially if you're 100% remote, to make sure that you're keeping the team collaboration in place and that you're putting things in place that keep them communicating.
Ashley had mentioned something on one of her prior slides, and it was talking about engaging with the community and social media and all of that. And I think it's important, and we could spend, and I know Ashley and I could probably come up with a 2-day seminar to talk about generational issues and changes in the workplace. But if you look at the statistics and how the workforce is changing just generationally, those things that Ashley mentioned, the work-life balance, the social connection, or the social and community support, those are becoming more and more important with younger individuals. So people that are baby boomers or Gen X's may not be as concerned about what you do for the community or what your social media presence looks like. But your millennials do, and your Gen Zers, they care. They want to know what you're doing in the community. And if you haven't updated your Facebook page or your Instagram page since 2019, you need to get somebody on it, because that's what they're looking at more than anything, to see who you are as an organization. I have a client who does a really good job, and they're in a pretty hard to recruit industry. And they do a wonderful job of promoting upward mobility within the organization through all of their social media channels. They'll spotlight an individual and interview them and post the video online and talk about where they were and how they moved up. And while, if you're like me and you're 50 and you don't care about that, I got to remember, it's not about me. It's not about me. I've got a job. I'm trying to find the next person to come in and fill my spot behind me. And we've got to help them get on your team the way they want to get on your team.
Yeah, and I think we just had another question pop up. Do you offer help in creating or reviewing pay tiers? I think both of our organizations do that. We certainly, I know, offer the ability to look at pay ranges, look at where do you want to fall. Honestly, what is your compensation strategy? Do you want to be a market leader? Do you want to be a market lagger, but you want to make sure that you have all these other benefits built up so that you can balance the business case for raising your pay? So certainly we offer compensation strategy and help with reviewing pay tiers and ranges for exempt and hourly. And then Carrie, I think you guys do the same.
Yeah, we do the same thing. And I think the key, Ashley mentioned it, the first thing is to really understand what your philosophy is. I get real frustrated, and I'm sure some of you do too, when you have an employee that comes in and says, well, I saw I can make 50 cents more down the street. And I'm like, well, yeah, but you're going to pay $600 more for your benefits. And so it's really figuring out where you want to fall. And the other thing to be concerned about, especially, I'm not sure what state everyone is in, but there are 17 jurisdictions in the country now that require a high level of pay transparency. So posting in it, in a lot of situations, you may actually have to post the range of the salary when you're hiring, and some at least when you've offered them the position. So looking at this and understanding, and I always advise my clients, let's move to as much of a transparent environment as you can, because that's what millennials and Gen Zers are expecting, is more of a transparent discussion about pay. Whereas, your baby boomers never talked about pay. Gen X's, we didn't talk about it that much, but younger folks, they talk about it all the time. And we all know that there's nothing we can do about it. We can't say you can't talk about it. So I'd rather be able to lead that conversation and manage that information before somebody just goes on Indeed and says, I should make $20 an hour when they really should make 12, 15.
Yeah, and we're honestly, just to add on to what Carrie said, what we are starting to see a lot are, because people are having to compete in the market with the current pay rates, they're beginning to bring in people higher than maybe their current existing staff is. And to Carrie's point, I'm actually working with a client right now that we're trying to help them with their pay equity situation.
Yeah, huge equity situations.
Because people are really beginning to talk about it in the workplace, and it's beginning to cause them to lose some of their talent that they've had for years, because the perception is you value these new people coming in more than me. The pay strategy is huge.
If you don't do something about that, then all you're doing, I tell my clients, you're incentivizing them to leave. You're incentivizing me to go somewhere else if you pay the new people more. So Ashley's right. You got to have a strategy on how we handle that. But the first thing's to know what the market's paying and what you want to pay. And then you have to own that. I mean, I don't like to be held hostage by employees that come and say, well, I've got a $5 an hour raise. If you don't match it, I'm leaving. But we need to have strategy around to have that conversation, so we feel comfortable with the decision that we've made as an organization on what we're going to pay.
Okay,
So
I'm sorry.
Help with that.
Yep. Going back to the deaf and hearing impaired employees. Years ago, I worked at the Washington Post in their heyday when they had the printing presses in the facility, and Gallaudet, which is a deaf college for deaf people, is in DC, and they had a huge pipeline from there. One of the benefits was, with all the machines running, they could communicate across the room with each other. In fact, my friend got fired in sign language, but that's another story. But that's a niche thing where they found something that worked. So kind of along those lines, do you have examples of people maybe hiring, people with disabilities, like say autism, that are really good at repetitive jobs, but not thinking like overly?
I mean, I know that, at least in this area, you can work with vocational rehab, all kinds of organizations to help find the right fit for you. And you're right, not everybody can do every job, but I can't do every job. But there's certainly lots of organizations, but I'm going to actually handle that because I know she's seen more of that than I have.
Yeah, I certainly think we've seen a lot more manufacturers look at, someone who may have a disability or may not have the ability to perform the full job. Are there sections of their process that they can carve out? We have a refrigerator manufacturer that we work with, and they specifically work with the disability board in their local area, and they have those individuals come in, they have them over into an area, and it's almost like a packing line. So they're using those individuals to make sure they're packing the ice tray with the instruction book and put that into the package that is going to be fed into the computer, into the box with the refrigerator. So they're not having to pay a full-time worker to do that, but they're able to also partner with the local community to get some of these individuals who may not have an opportunity to do other jobs to do that. So certainly I think we're seeing that be a trend, and it's really about analyzing the jobs in your workplace to see what are jobs that are easily trained, that maybe don't have, a high mental capacity need and or physical ability, that we can partner and try to figure out how to carve out opportunities for these individuals. So yeah, certainly seeing that be a big trend.
Yeah. And I know working with some organizations, especially organizations like vocational rehab, beyond the fact that it helps you find good good people and it helps you do something and help rehabilitate individuals, there's some tax and financial benefits behind some of these organizations to work with. I know I used to work in manufacturing and hired people out of vocational rehab, and the first 90 days I had them at the time, vocational rehab paid their salary. So I got 90, and we would hire them long term, but I got somebody for 3 months that was free and a great employee. And, so looking at those kind of advantages, if you, beyond the fact that you just want to do the right thing and find good people, there's also some incentive there financially for organizations.
Great. And then one more question regarding remote work. Is there an expected time for response to an email or phone call? I mean, that's part of the policy setting, I'm assuming.
You set it up. You say it. You say, I expect that you, respond to a phone call within, now I think you've got to be realistic, right? If I'm on a call, I can't respond to a call, but you set those expectations up early. We're going to always communicate via Teams or, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, so I see the question that's on there. Why do you think younger generations are not attracted to manufacturing? What do you think specifically? I think honestly, a lot of it is reputation that precedes manufacturing that may or may not even be accurate anymore. So if you ask a lot of the younger generations, they perceive that the jobs are difficult, hard, labor demanding, potentially dirty, that they do require extended hours away from family. So I think some of that is us beginning to build that change in reputation, even working with local high schools to let them tour manufacturing facilities. I think I do this a lot with some of my clients where we'll partner with high schools, have high school students come tour. And it's amazing the look on their faces when they say, wow, this is not what I expected at all. We are already beginning to see a shift. Interestingly enough, millennials are very uninterested in manufacturing. They're just now starting to come around to it, but we are beginning to see Gen Zers have an increased interest in manufacturing. So we're already beginning to see that shift slightly. But I do think it's honestly the old reputation that is preceding it.
Which is sad because it's really cool. I mean, it's well, you can get somebody into your plant. And that's what Ashley said. I mean, you get these kids in, you can start internships and apprenticeships and all kinds of programs to get young people interested. And I know people say a lot of times that, well, if I spend all this money and on these people, what if they leave? And I'm like, well, but what if you don't train them and develop them and they stay? You're going to have all these people that are no good, and then you're going to lose everybody. You're going to lose people to those really top tier organizations that Ashley's working with, because they're going to train their people. They're going to get them invested in their careers. So we got to start changing the narrative internally.
I also think that people don't realize how much money can be made in manufacturing. I think people still perceive that manufacturing wages fall behind a lot of other industries, which we are beginning to certainly see that is definitely not the case. And then there was also, especially in your skilled labor trades and manufacturing, there was a push for a really long time in high schools for people to go to four-year colleges and not to go to trade school. And so that's definitely played a part in where we see millennials falling on manufacturing, is because there was such a push to go to four-year schools rather than skilled trade.
Yeah, one last question. So with the gig economy type worker, is that something where you just bring people in like you would at a temp office and say, here's how you answer the phone, you show them? Or is it like a training pool where you have 30 people that have gone through training, a certain amount of training, and they can take the gig job whenever they want?
I think there's certainly different ways to do it. The manufacturing facility that I was specifically talking about, when they committed the gig worker to come on, or the flex worker to come on is really what they called it, not gig work, but flex work to come on, the individual had to train, and they remember, they put them on assembly jobs that didn't take a ton of training time. So they would say, you have to be able to work first, second, or third shift, because they had a 3-shift model for at least 2 weeks so that we can get you fully trained. And then at that point, that's when you can begin to have the flexible work. And then they had an app where they would publish the shifts that they needed, and the individual could go on. Now they did have to do 4-hour shifts. So they had to go on and say, okay, I can come in and work today from 2 to 6, or I can come in and I can work, from 12 to 4. So they had to do it in 4-hour shifts, but they did come in and be fully trained. And then they were able to go sign up for shifts based on the app. And then they were held to a normal attendance policy. So if they signed up for shifts and they didn't attend, then that still counted as an attendance point.
And, in order to make that work, and I'm sure what Ashley's client did was, you've got to bring them on your payroll. You've got to put them through the new hire process. You've got to do their I-9s. You got to, in South Carolina, you got to put them through E-Verify. You can't skip that, but you can partner with somebody like an HTI that can manage that for you. If you don't have the capacity in your HR or payroll department to get all those people onboarded and go through all of the the policy review that you're going to have to do, then let somebody help you.
And being transparent on that, I think the biggest challenge they ran into, because I talked about that being a solution, but I didn't talk about the challenge. I think the biggest challenge that they ran into with that was the supervisors being able to manage the talent that was coming in and out of the process, the shift process, right? So that was something that they did see as a challenge. And they did this on a temporary basis to try to eliminate overtime. So it's not a model they stuck with long-term, in full transparency, but they probably kept it for a year to help until they could get their overtime under control. And so, but that was probably the biggest challenge, was the supervisors knowing who was supposed to be there and who wasn't.
I mean, it's just like what we see retail do at Christmas, right? You can get hired to work at Target for the holidays, and it's something a lot like that.
Well, ladies, we're very grateful for your time today. Thank you. Very informative and very, very helpful. We're grateful for your time.
Well, you're welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Ashley or I can be of help. Please don't hesitate to give us a call. We're here to help you.